a focus on testing rather than investing. Most centrally, the law does not address the profound educational inequalities that plague our nation. With high-spending schools outspending low-spending schools at least 3 to 1 in most states, multiplied further by inequalities across states, the United States has the most inequitable education system in the industrialized world. Standardized testing creates an unfair playing field and fails to allow students to show their intelligence. Instead of basing a student's worth on a test score, we should be trying to get to the root of why students are underperforming in schools.
The No Child Left Behind policy, known as the NCLB, was enacted in 2002 by President George W. Bush, aiming to make the education system nationally competitive. It focused on helping minority groups who fall behind their peers. The NCLB placed more academic accountability on schools, increased education quality, and implemented policies to achieve these goals. Contention 1. The No Child Left Behind policy increases the quality of education by requiring higher standards for teachers, encouraging parental involvement, and implementing a standard for grades. The policy increased the criteria required to become a teacher, thus allowing for a theoretical decrease in the quality of education. This criterion includes that teachers have a bachelor's degree, an in-state teaching certificate, and demonstrate a thorough understanding of the subject they teach. Furthermore, the NCLB requires highly qualified teachers to be evenly distributed throughout each state. This change is intended to ensure that teachers are educated, capable adults. Further, NCLB required schools to have a written parental involvement plan. These plans involve informing parents about educational standards, school enhancement plans, and potentially allocating funds to parents who need assistance with transportation and childcare. Additionally, schools must distribute report cards in order to keep parents informed about their kids' grades. This promotes parental involvement and increases encouragement for good grades within the home. Additionally, the NCLB mandates that states implement a grading standard and assess their students annually to determine whether they are achieving this goal. Assessment is done through standardized testing. These results are then compared to state standards. Schools that miss this standard are given several options to assist their students. By implementing grading standards and requiring schools to work towards achievement, not just students, and the NCLB creates a learning environment that holds schools just as accountable as students, making a healthier, more balanced learning environment. Contention 2. The NCLB has improved test scores and performance of demographics that have historically struggled in the American school system. One of the primary goals of the NCLB was to improve test scores and raise standards for disadvantaged subgroups across the nation. White students have consistently outscored Hispanic and African Americans students before NCLB, but following the passing of the Act, the gaps have narrowed. In 2007, the gap between African American and white students reached record lows in 4th grade reading. Both African American and Hispanic students have achieved their historically highest scores in 8th grade math. 4th and 8th grade math. Along with this, graduation rates in several demographics have improved. The overall graduation rate in 2017 rose to an all-time high of 83%. Dropout rates of African American and Hispanic students have heavily reduced. These changes primarily stem from the Title I funding given to improve high-poverty schools, which was raised to $14.9 billion in 2016. This extra funding allows for lower-income students to have access to the same tools and extra programs that higher-income students have, such as tutoring, more time in the classroom, and higher quality education. Contention 3. Expectations and options created through the No Child Left Behind or NCLB law cultivated more student success, therefore the policy have to be kept. The NCLB applied to general education students K through 12 with the intention of maximizing success for students throughout the United States. Schools were required to meet specific criteria. These requirements included testing levels of proficiency. Students would be tested in reading, math, and other basic subjects. Levels of proficiency or achievement targets students are expected to reach annually, known as adequate yearly progress or AYP, are defined by the state the school resided in. Said levels were measured by standardized tests. Schools that met the AYP received needed Title I funds or other government assistance. However, if a school failed to meet the AYP for 2+ years, they must allow students to transfer to another school in the district. Failing to meet the AYP for 3+ years means the school must offer free tutoring. These programs were implemented to allow students in inadequate schools access to better education. Student success is the primary goal of this law. There has to be consequence in order for there to be effective results. George W. Bush said those words described in the No Child Left Behind policy. Each intention and execution of this law strive towards reforming education throughout the United States. A law created a goal which aimed for students in the United States to be proficient in basic subjects. More parental involvement, increased teaching standards, policy implementation, improved education for disadvantaged demographics, and options for students were crafted by the No Child Left Behind law. This cultivated student success, therefore the policy ought to be kept. The negative rests.
They will take 1 minute to prep for the crossfire, right, so y'all can chat in that time. About to start the crossfire, they have 3 minutes where they can ask each other questions and try and propose in each other's arguments or disprove something or find some kind of way to weaken their argument. They have 3 minutes. All right. Affirmative begins ready.
Do you believe that the NCLB helps close the achievement gap between wealthy and low-income children? And if so, please provide us with a statistic that supports that.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Do you believe the NCLB helps close the achievement gap between wealthy and low-income children?
Yes. Section 1231 of NCLB it implements programs that help poverty-stricken and illiterate children, and including adults, receive adequate education.
So I actually have a study that says otherwise. Thank you for your response.
Is it not true that the NCLB implements policies to better suit different student needs based on the needs observed by the AYP?
Please repeat the question.
Is it not true that the NCLB implements policies to better suit different students' needs based on the needs that are observed by the AYP?
It may be true, but if they do implement these policies, what do they do when they fail? When these policies fail that they enact to help students achieve higher standards, when they fail, what to...
Are you asking when schools don't meet the AYP, what happens? Programs, if you're asking that, programs such as tutoring are implemented when schools do not meet the AYP.
Okay. May I ask a question?
Yes, yeah, okay.
According to the article, does tutoring work? An education economist examines the evidence on whether it's effective. During the era of No Child Left Behind, parents of children in failing schools could sign them up for tutoring outside of the school at the school district's expense. Research shows that only 23% of eligible students participated, and for those students, the average effect was close to zero. In cases like these, what does the NCLB do if their support techniques are effective?
Can you repeat? Can you clarify the question? Can you clarify the question?
So when the NCLB implements techniques such as tutoring and the results come back as ineffective, such as the average effect was close to zero when implementing tutoring programs.
All right, after the first crossfire, they now have 4 minutes to state their rebuttals against the arguments of opposing people. Affirmative, you can start when ready.
The negative stated that national test scores in math and reading improved since the implementation of the No Child Left Behind Act. But according to the National Center for Education Statistics, long-term data from the National Assessment of Educational Progress shows otherwise. While there may have been short-term gains immediately following NCOB's enactment, the broader trends tell a different story. In fact, the 2022 NAEP long-term trend assessment revealed a significant decline in performance. 9-year-old students' average scores dropped 5 points in reading and 7 points in math compared to 2020. The largest reading decline since 1990 and the first ever decline in math. These results suggest that not only did early gains under NCOB not sustain, but that overall progress and achievement has stagnated or even regressed, especially among lower performing students. This evidence challenges the claim that NCOB led to lasting improvements in academic outcomes. Also, according to data reported by the 74 million, 2013 marked the peak in 8th grade math scores since the implementation of the No Child Left Behind Act, with an approximate 6-point gain from the 2003 baseline. However, this progress was short-lived. After 2013, student achievement declined significantly. By 2022, all student groups had experienced a 10-point drop in math scores, and the achievement gap between high and low-performing students had widened. This demonstrates that rather than closing disparities, the NCOB Act ultimately contributed to a growing divide in student performance, especially harming those that it was intended to help. So while the law initially appeared to yield modest gains, its long-term effects reveal deeper systemic failures. Lastly, NCOB measures success in a narrow and often misleading way. While NCOB aims to increase accountability, it often leads to unintended negative consequences. Accountability is not pushed onto students because schools end up being punished for negative test scores. According to the article, test performance, emotional and physical factors affecting test performance, the following factors affect test scores and are unrelated to academics: panic, carelessness, lack of focus, excessive anxiety, cramming, inadequate diet, lack of exercise, lack of sleep, and poor attitude. This translates to schools being penalized for factors that they themselves and not even their students can control at some points. Accountability, according to the NCOB, is based on standardized tests that can and often ineffectively and inadequately measure a student's academic achievement.
Our opponents have stated that the No Child Left Behind policy creates a learning environment where teachers must teach the test. However, that is not true. Standardized tests were implemented to measure student success and compare stats to the AYP. A 3-year study analyzed classroom assignments and compared student achievements to standardized test scores across more than 400 elementary classrooms. In classrooms in which teachers employed more intellectual instruction, student test score gains exceeded the national average by 20%. Students who were given few authentic intellectual assignments gained much less than the national average. Standardized testing is not intended to modify teaching methods, it is merely a measurement. Our opponent also incorrectly stated that standardized testing contradicts the goals of the NCLB. However, we would like to inform you that the NCLB is not contradicted by standardized testing. In fact, NCLB implements standardized testing as a way to measure academic growth in students and ensures that they are receiving an adequate education, as well as receiving any help they may need to reach academic levels of proficiency in their classes. Our opponent has focused on standardized testing throughout their contentions and rebuttals. However, this is not a discussion about standardized testing, this is a debate about the merits of the NCLB. NCLB promotes standardized testing not as a measure of academic intelligence, but as a measure of academic needs. It measures areas where students fall behind with the intention of providing aid like tutoring and stronger course materials. The affirmative stated that the NCLB has lowered the standard of education since its implementation. However, this is incorrect for a number of reasons. Firstly, NCLB sets standards for education. It also involved parents in their children's education. These, along with assistance given to schools that fail to meet these standards, have all helped to raise the standard of education. NCLB has also raised the standard for teachers, ensuring that they are highly knowledgeable and qualified to teach in their subjects. So, the affirmative's argument that NCLB has lowered the standard of education is inaccurate.
All right, we're gonna take 1 minute. You ready? We're gonna chat in that minute.
You mentioned the standard.
Would you say that standardized tests accurately measure a student's intelligence even though factors such as diet, stress, and family life can affect test scores?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say it's the most accurate measure, but it is a good measure for certain subjects, for certain basic subjects. Although there are things as like anxious test takers, there are also...
Thank you for your answer.
You mentioned that standardized testing isn't an accurate measure of intelligence. If that's true, how can you use test scores to prove that the NCLB is ineffective?
Because
These test scores show us that students are going to these tests and not feeling like prepared enough to do it. You can use test scores to show that a test shouldn't be used. Look.
If you're implying that test scores are an inaccurate measure, how can you also say that they prove something is also inaccurate?
Because they're an accurate showcasing of a student's intelligence. So you can still look at a test score and see that that's what's happening.
Thank you for your answer.
May I ask a question?
You may.
How is it fair to compare schools in wealthy districts to underfunded schools with fewer resources and still expect the same outcomes?
The NCLB doesn't compare every single state to every other state. It's based on the needs of that area. If that makes sense.
Thank you for your answer.
You said that schools are penalized for bad scores. How so? Can you repeat the question? You mentioned that schools are penalized for bad test scores or not meeting the AYP. How so?
So if schools do not meet the AYP, eventually they will, the NCLB will cut costs or cause the closure of a school.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Were you aware that schools who failed to meet the AYP have their funds immediately redirected to programs that help students, such as tutoring?
I provided you with a stat earlier. That stated that most of the time, tutoring provided by NCLB is effective.
Thank you for your answer.
No further questions?
No further questions.
Do I need time to plan?
Time to plan.
All right, now they'll get 3 minutes to summarize their points and their arguments, highlighting their strongest points.
the No Child Left Behind Act fails to establish a fair and effective learning environment for all students. Rather than fostering intellectual growth, it diminishes students' potential, creates high-stakes testing pressures, and does little to ignite a genuine passion for learning. Not only does it diminish the authentic passion for learning students once had, but it also teaches them to not take accountability. The No Child Left Behind policy takes children who once had a spark and passion for learning and turns them into undetermined adults who bring that lack of passion into their jobs. We firmly agree with the resolution the United States ought to abolish the No Child Left Behind policy. This act is crucial for the success and survival of authentic and meaningful education. If this issue is not focused on through immediate action, surely the already declining intelligence quotient will depreciate at unfathomable rates. Out of the average score 15-year-old students made on the Program for International Student Assessment Mathematics Literacy Scale, Singapore had a 110-point advantage over the United States. If the U.S. continues to ignore the disparity between its education system and other countries' education systems, the gap will continue to widen. In order to substantially and positively increase the educational standards in the United States, it is crucial that we stop relying on test scores and financial status of students. As stated earlier, although it might not have been the original intention, the NCLB undoubtedly supports education based on the financial status of students and education based on test scores. Due to this unfortunate reality, the NCLB promotes the decline of academic intelligence in the U.S., promotes the degradation of low-income minority schools, and upholds the standards that it aims to fix. It is for this reason that we firmly and wholeheartedly agree with the resolution.
The No Child Left Behind policy set down standards for better education in the United States. This required higher standards for teachers to meet, encouraging more parental involvement than ever before, and implementing statewide standards for grades. The policy has been successful in narrowing the gaps in test scores, performance of specific demographics, and historical growth. The NCLB raised academic standards of success and altered the options given to schools based on student achievement. This was all done under the pretense of developing successful schools across the country and allowing students to unlock and achieve their academic potential. Children have the unalienable right to learn. As George W. Bush stated, I call upon those who can determine the fate of the No Child Left Behind in the future to stay strong in the face of criticism, to not weaken the law, because in weakening the law, you weaken the chance for a child to succeed in America.
They're going to prepare for the final crossfire, during crossfire, and they can vote whatever holes they want to in each other's arguments, and they get 2.5 minutes. Y'all can chat.
In a survey recently conducted, only 25% of educators believe that the standardized testing provides useful information. The survey had 870 participants. If even our educators believe that, or if even some of our educators believe that standardized testing is ineffective, why should we continue to push for these tests?
Can you repeat the question?
Would you like me to repeat the stat as well, or just the question?
Just the question.
If even some of our educators believe that standardized testing is ineffective, why should we continue to push for these tests?
No answer.
Okay.
quality education without funding that was given by NCLB.
We are only arguing for the abolishment of NCLB. We are only arguing for the abolishment of NCLB. This doesn't necessarily mean that in the future there couldn't be the establishment of another policy, a better policy that could help better
Thank you
help.
for your answer.
Do you believe the NCLB supports equality? If so, why does it hold students with disabilities to the same benchmarks as their peers?
Can you repeat the question?
Do you believe the NCLB supports equality? If so, why does it hold students with disabilities to the same benchmarks as their peers?
The NCLB does not hold students with disabilities to the same benchmarks. They hold them to the same standards, but they are tested in ways that the students are able to show the growth and knowledge they gain.
But did you know that a lot of the time, whenever this happens, whenever disabled students are given these different tests, the schools will go and push those students out so they can have higher test scores?
Do you have a statistic on this?
I believe so. No.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
You said that the policy decreases student accountability. How so?
So the NCLB decreases student accountability by essentially taking most of the accountability off the students and pushing it onto the teachers to push for higher test scores.
Are you implying that the NCLB decreases the amount of work a student must do?
No, not at all.
Thank you for your answer.
Not
All right, now, both sides will present their final focus. Their final focus is to highlight why you as an audience should vote for them. Because after this, will everyone raise a hand and vote? They get 2 minutes to do so. All right, affirmative, begin when ready.
As previously stated, standardized testing upholds the system the No Child Left Behind Act tries to fix. These tests are used to measure a student's testing ability opposed to their academic strengths and willingness to learn. According to the article, effects on standardized testing on students and teachers, key benefits and challenges, Standardized tests fail to account for students who learn and demonstrate academic proficiency in different ways. For example, a student who struggles to answer a multiple choice question about grammar or punctuation may be an excellent writer. Standardized tests uphold the system that the No Child Left Behind Act tries to dismantle. Standardized tests can be especially difficult for students with learning disabilities or anxiety, and for those who are under the poverty line. Standardized tests are just that, a standard. They take away from a student's individual struggle and experience and place them all on the same playing field. Invalidating those students who may not be naturally adept at test taking. Not only do standardized tests not take into account a student's true academic strengths, but they also ignore most subjects that do not pertain to math or reading. This means that students who are interested in art, music, or the humanities are constantly overlooked. To do well on standardized tests, it often requires the use of a tutor, study books, and memorization. Just the preparation for a standardized test can be a financial toll on students and their families. In the article, Standardized Testing is Still Failing Students by Cindy Long, she writes, the current data used to measure student success in the Act Snyder closely correlates to race, income, and family educational attainment. It really only tells us about the advantages and disadvantages outside school, not what schools are actually doing. If we continue to use standardized testing as a basis for knowledge, we will never be able to fix up the American education system and will continue to reduce students down to nothing but a number. The affirmative rests.
We firmly negate the resolution. The No Child Left Behind policy should be implemented in schools. We believe that every child deserves the opportunity to learn in a safe and learner-centered environment. The NCLB was enacted to give all students a route to thorough education through adequate teaching, academic acknowledgement within the home, and institutional accountability. By holding teachers to a higher educational standard, encouraging parents to be a part of their children's school-related activities, and installing a grading standard that held schools accountable, the NCLB improves the structure of the learning system. Education is designed to lay the groundwork for students to flourish in the future. Without a well-developed education system that takes accountability for the success of its students and works to make every child feel heard and helped, we jeopardize the future that will determine the direction of the world. That is why we believe a policy like No Child Left Behind that aims to adapt to the learning needs of its students and uplift their academic achievement should be implemented and carried out within schools across the country. NCLB has a main goal of raising student achievement by holding states, districts, and schools accountable for academic results. Every child deserves a sufficient and just education. The No Child Left Behind policy was implemented to help raise standards, assist low-income districts, and give every single student in the classroom a chance to learn. The negative rests.
All right. Can I get another round of applause for both teams? All right. Our judges, Ms. Turner and Ms. Molinovich, do y'all have any questions, comments, concerns you want to throw at them?
Let me think about that for a second. You know what, if I could get everybody's name, that would probably be real helpful. I know Celine, I know Ashley. I don't know our other person on the affirmative side.
Ansley.
Ansley? Okay, and then from what I understand, we have Ray.
Yes.
And who are other, and is it Kayla on the end?
Kayla's on the end.
And in the middle?
Myers.
I'm sorry?
Myers.
Okay. You all did a great job. Is this where do you want me to share comments? I don't have a lot of questions at this point, but.
Share your comments.
So you all did a beautiful job, honestly. Each one of you presented beautifully. I watched this debate during first block, and our introductory presenters, Ashley and Kayla, you did a good job of slowing down your pace. I could see where you could slow it down even further a bit, but at least in this instance, I was able to understand everything, which during during first block, not as much. You want my judgments yet, or my final judging, or do we want to serve?
Let's let the students vote and then we'll get that.
Sorry?
Let the students vote and then we'll get that.
Okay, so
Yes, ma'am.
I'll pause to, okay.
Thank you. Ms. Turner, did you have any comments on their performance?
Well, I will say that I appreciate that sometimes it takes us a few times to feel really, really confident, and I saw such great improvement between the first and the second time, so bravo, you guys are slowing down. You're able to articulate much more clearly to your audience, and I think we all understood the debate with much more clarity this afternoon. So bravo, I'm proud of all of you. It's an enormous amount of work and research that goes into doing any kind of an academic debate. So bravo, I'm proud of all of you.
Thank y'all very much for your comments. All right, now you, the student body, the people who watched the debate, it was 4. Raise your hand in the event you believe the affirmative, people who are against the NCLB 1. Hands high. All right, thank you. Now, if you believe that the negative, people for the NCLB 1, raise your hands high. All right, the affirmative has it. Good job, y'all. Now, if our judges have any comments regarding their actual arguments.
Yeah, so I have to say,
Ms.
I'm
Williams.
going to part with the crowd, and I'm going to say that, oh, thank you. I'm going to say that I'm going to part with the crowd and say that the negative side did a better job of convincing me. And my reasoning behind this is because while I saw passion and opinion from both sides, I felt that the negative team did a better job of presenting me with data, hard statistics, numbers. Ray quoted something in particular. I think he said something like section
1231.
Thank you. Which again, I don't know how section 1231 reads, but the fact that you were able to quote that and present some statistical hard facts, evidence, that swayed me to saying that the negative side took it this time.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
All right, y'all are free